today we are talking about something that is close to my heart and close to the core of this work. We are talking about divine feminine leadership. And my guest today, Philine Kok, is someone who truly embodies and is bringing forward that transmission. She is an entrepreneur, an emotional alchemist, a leader, and the founder of Mmm Cacao. So welcome, Philine. I'm so happy to be talking to you about this today.
Thank you so much for having me. It feels really so blessed to be here today.
For me too. So first, you've brought your cacao.
Yes.
Mmm Cacao. So should we start there?
I'd love to. I'd love to do a short guidance.
I would love that.
So you can get your cup. So this cacao is very high quality. It comes from Colombia and it is made with a lot of love. So what always is very important when you drink the cacao is to connect with your heart. So I'd love to invite you to take a moment to connect with your heart and connect with your energy to the cacao. And bring yourself in a state of receiving. You can bring it to your nose, just smell it.
Hence the name.
Exactly. And when you're ready, you can take your first sip.
Again.
Exactly.
Is that where you got the name?
It's a funny story. It's a long story. But, well, I think the name is like, how do you say, like a sonic expression of what the brand is all about. Her tagline is enjoy the now.
See, I'm like naturally just doing it. None of that was
Exactly.
planned.
It's like, and really, how do you say, like when we first smelled this cacao, when it arrived in our home in Amsterdam, we were like, wow, like we smell it. We're like, oh my God, this is really something else. Like we have, tasted cacao before and did cacao ceremonies, but just the information that you could smell, you have the same thing with really pure products like doTERRA or really high quality coffee, and you can smell it. If you have, how do you say, a sensitive nose and you smell it.
I do.
Same, like for me, that was like a whole experience just to smell it. And then we started, I think we took us a year to like refine the recipe and really like test out like how do we make this cacao like the most delicious ever.
Yeah.
And I tested so many different things, like different herbs, different way of preparation. At some point I figured out that it's really important what plant-based milk you use because it balances out the bitterness of the cacao.
Right. There's a bit of chemistry happening there.
Yes. So a lot of the pure cacao can be quite bitter, but if you use the right quality cacao and the right plant-based milk, it balances out. And then now for this cacao, we only use hazelnut milk and cacao and nothing else. Like there's no sugar, honey, sweeteners or anything. And it's creamy, right?
It is creamy, and the hazelnut makes perfect sense. It goes so well with it. I mean, it does. I wasn't thinking Nutella, but it does have that kind of round taste to it.
It's like the hazelnut and the cacao, they are friends, obviously.
They are friends. Yeah. They're my friends.
Yeah, same for me. And when someone told me like, hey, have you ever tried hazelnut milk? And I was like, wow, I feel, and then I tasted it and I was like, this is it. Like, this is the best combination with our cacao. And how do you say, like, I am a sensitive person. So for me, the quality and the experience of the taste is super important. So I'm really happy that we're now at a place where we have the perfect combination and I don't have to think about it. I just make it and it's always a winner. It's always a winner. And even like we have this beautiful device where we make it with, it takes 3 minutes to prepare it.
Yeah.
And even because usually you make it in a pan, you take like your time and, you can be very present with it. And if you want, you can say your prayers. And that's beautiful, but we also wanted to make it accessible for daily use. And I don't have time every day, to make cacao, 15 minutes. So we have this device. And even with this device, which I wanted to pick one that's, how do you say, honors the substance of the cacao. It doesn't like shake it or like lets the fluid go all the way, and this really gently stirs it and makes it in 3 minutes, and it has the best taste. So you just add the milk and then the cacao, and then 3 minutes on.
Delicious. And in that 3 minutes, we did do some breathing and meditation. So we could actually do that while it's mixing and becoming the perfect concoction.
Yes, it's really beautiful to see how this company is unfolding for me. And it has been a journey, of course. Like, I think everything that you're creating is always going to ask you to grow so much to become the person that you want to be.
Yes.
And for me, Mmm Cacao has been like my growth vessel.
I can imagine. And I want to talk about that unfolding in that journey. And I just want to touch into something you said about the smell. And I'm also very sensitive, especially to smell. I have like a heightened sense of it. And it's so interesting because the olfactory part of our brain is so linked to memory and remembering. And so much of what we've talked about before and off camera is about remembering wisdom. So I guess that's a great place to kind of dive into the unfolding of your journey and what divine feminine leadership has meant to you on this journey.
Wow. Beautiful. How do you say, like, it has been quite a long journey, because I remember being little and I would always, work in male dominant environments. Like, I used to work in sales. I used to do door-to-door sales. So very hardcore.
Yes.
Most of the people I work with were men. And I could always feel like this, how do you say, sense of that my talents were not respected the same way as if I were a man. So I think I developed at a certain time, I think already as a young woman, kind of this idea like I have to be like a man to be respected and to be honored and to be safe. And I feel a lot of women hold this belief, even in like subtle ways and some maybe more extreme. So for me, the remembering was a lot around remembering the power of the feminine and remembering how to be able to feel safe in a world where that's maybe not protected as much, or it has not been for a long time. I feel like now we're kind of waking up or remembering all these different wisdom that have been buried consciously for like 2,000 years. So it's also like I now see that it's not a coincidence that we can be scared to be in our feminine energy, because
Absolutely.
it can be like a very good protective mechanism for ourselves.
Yes, and it's been really the only template related to leadership in the past.
Yes.
To my knowledge, and someone who's worked in the corporate world and worked in New York finance on Wall Street, it was not brought up. It was not even, there wasn't a template at all. And as I moved on to forge my own path as an entrepreneur in female-led businesses, there was no template for me. So I defaulted to the masculine leadership, and that was quite a burnout for me.
Same. Same.
I imagine.
Yeah. I had a really big burnout when I was 21, because I started to do this sales, and then at some point I got really good at it. But because I read this book called The Secret.
Oh, yeah.
And then I started to kind of manifest and create my reality. And I started to, have a really good vibe when I was walking the doors, and I was just giving everyone compliments and just sharing a lot of love and good energy. And I would get the best scores ever. And everyone was like, what's she doing? Like, why is this working? And I manifested myself all the way to also like the most, famous business center of the Netherlands. It's the Zuidas, you call it, as an account executive for an IT company when I was 21 years old. And when I got there, and there was, like you said, like no template for me as a woman how to use my energy, I worked there for 2.5 years, and then I got a major burnout.
Wow. Okay. I have chills as you tell this story, because so much of it resonates around manifestation and that knowledge coming in and understanding co-creation with the universe. Because really without that understanding, you don't really even open yourself to another template, because really the other template tends to leave most of that out.
Yes.
So by moving into that, okay, I'm a co-creator here, it's a completely different way of bringing something into life, a completely different way of manifesting something into reality. So let's go back and talk about that. Like, what did The Secret give you in terms of understanding how to create and co-create?
Well, I feel like it opened when I read it when I was 19, so quite young. And when I read it, I remember like my whole soul was like vibrating. It was like truth, truth, truth. But I still feel like that gave me just one side of the truth. Like, because it was a lot about, becoming successful, making a lot of money. And I feel like I read that book with still having the programming in my system of what I thought was success.
Right.
And what I thought was, what I was going to become happy about. And those were still like the programming of society. So I thought, I'm happy when I have a lot of money, when I have a secure job, when I'm, have a good work for a very big company. So I did create all that. But then when I got there, I was really not happy. So it was like creation from this programming way of thinking what's right or wrong, or expectations from family, society, and then your own expectations. And then when I got there and I got this burnout, I was like, wait, like I created all this and it was supposed to make me happy, but I'm the most miserable I've ever been. And then I realized, okay, well, then I need to really dive deep into what's true and authentic for me and kind of uncover what really makes me happy from within.
Right. Because, so much of that book and that kind of early law of attraction stuff was the lens and the filter of it was still very like materialism focused. And I mean that in the sense of the way that your word is used, like about, a new car or material, but also the material world, like the physical world.
Yeah.
So it sounds like there was a process where you looked back and you said, okay, this method and this way of operating was amazing, but what I was using it for and where it got me wasn't. So I always find when we look back on things and we're like, okay, this got me somewhere that doesn't feel good.
Yeah.
There's an alchemical process because you do find the gifts in that.
Yes.
So what was that like for you when you had that realization?
Well, I can just describe it as a huge ego death, to be honest, because I think at that moment I realized that everything everyone has ever told me, it was not the truth. Like, it was not giving me happiness. It was not giving me joy. It was not giving me peace. And I remember like being very lost. It was really my dark night of the soul moment, because I created all this success, and also even my family and my friends were all like, wow, Philine, you're doing amazing. And, through all the rules of societies, I was doing great, but within I was like empty. And then for me, that was the moment when I started to realize that I really need to go and look within to create a life that is truly fulfilling for me. And I remember watching, or like, scrolling on Instagram, and I saw this video somewhere, and it said you could also sit with your emotions, because I was still like very emotionally like dysregulated and all over the place, especially in this burnout, because I was like, I couldn't.
What's happening to me? It doesn't measure up with what I'm seeing and what what I've created and what I have in front of me.
Exactly, and I felt that there were so many emotions coming to the surface at this time. So I saw you could also sit with your emotions. And I remember seeing that, and that was like a remembering for me, like, oh, wait, I need to do this. I don't know what's going to happen, and it feels very uncomfortable, but I know in my soul I need to do this. And then I started to sit with my emotions every day. So every day I got triggered, I would sit and I would actually allow myself to feel it. And to be honest, like the first couple of months, it was horrifying.
Yes.
Because you
were avoiding them for a reason.
I was avoiding them for a reason and for a long time. So in the beginning, it felt like, you know, when you have this pressure of like when you cook water in this pressure cooker, like, and it's making the sound of like very high pitched sound of all the pressure that's there.
Yes.
And that's how I felt in the beginning. But then I kind of let go of the lid and the pressure just started to go down, down, down until I felt like I was not in this mode again of like bursting to tears at any moment.
Right.
And it was a process of like to be honest, until this day, of every time I feel triggered, I'm gonna go sit with it. I'm gonna allow myself to feel it and go and really go feel it where it is in my body. But through every time that I was sitting with it, and I released it, there was always a gift on the other side. And I noticed that and I was like, interesting. Like and it felt really satisfying, to be honest. Like, of course, like in the moment, it's like really not comfortable and you're moving through all of these different ranges of emotions from anger to fear to frustration to, you know, like there's a lot there.
Yeah.
But
and one layer usually protects the other layer.
Exactly. And then I noticed at first I was really able to feel all the sadness and the grief, and then I was not able to feel the anger. And then there's this layer of really anger and rage that I tapped into. But every time I was allowing myself to feel it, there was a gift. And I started to notice that my reality was also shifting. So every time I, you know, faced something like a trigger or something that was holding me back and I was able to feel it and then release it, my reality shifted. So first I was attracting all kinds of different things and lessons and uncomfortable realities. And then when I got triggered by it, I would sit with it, I would feel it, I would release it, and then that reality would let go. It would completely disappear from my life.
Right. Wow. So you were basically realizing like this powerful process that you can intentionally do shifts you not only out of the pain, but into something purposeful or a knowing or a gift, as you say.
Yeah. It's, how do you say, like, I remember at some point before I met Mark that I started to look into my codependency pattern because I had a lot of these, how do you say, relationship with men where it felt super unsafe and, you know, I felt really anxious attached. And then I started to really sit with that and fully feel all the fear and, you know, everything that would come up. And at some point I really felt like, okay, now I have completely set with this anxious attach, like, which I feel a lot of people are either anxious or avoidant in different, you know, situations. And then when I fully faced that within myself and let go of all the emotions around that, I think 2 weeks later, I met Mark, my partner.
So because you shifted the pattern.
Exactly.
Right, because like when we put things that are uncomfortable or painful into the unconscious, as we all do, and you know, also, you know, giving, you know, honor to that because sometimes we have to survive. So it's also like, yes, thank you, coping mechanism. I coped.
Yes.
But we put it in, and because, you know, we're trying not to feel it and we're just kind of like navigating, we create these patterns. And when we can go into them, we can resolve them. And usually they're relationship, because everything's relational.
Yeah.
And so often, and this is a big part of my work with the process, is that so often it is related to early attachment and attunement injury, yes, right? But the way that you went in and you attuned to yourself and you said, what do I feel? Because so many of us aren't really like asked that or seen, but when we can start doing it to ourselves, we can actually repair like some really root stuff from the bottom up.
Yes.
And that shifts the pattern, and it doesn't have to take years. So as you said, like you started doing this and 2 weeks later,
yes,
right? Because energy is fast and furious. It's, yes, not like years of analysis. It's completely different. It's as you were kind of discovering this in your work, this new template for operating seems like it was starting to emerge. Like there's a new set of information here, and it's faster and it's more powerful.
Yeah, exactly. And how do you say, I want to highlight the importance of that you can break through anything that's on your path by facing it. Because I feel like we have these beautiful dreams or goals and we're like, how am I going to get there? Like, it feels so far away, or it feels like such a huge mountain to climb. And sometimes it is, because your dreams might be super big. But what I noticed in the journey of the last 7 years is that every time I would set a goal, I would get these, how do you say, the universe would show me all the reasons why I was not ready yet. So I would get, for example, this codependency. I was having a goal for myself. I want to have this beautiful, sacred relationship. And then the universe showed me all the reasons why I was not ready for that yet. But I was able to face it. And because I was able to face it, I was able to create it.
Right. Yes. And that is so useful, but it feels so it's so intuitive, but it doesn't feel in the mind. It feels counterintuitive in the mind, but the intuitive part, the new operating system coming online, knows you need to do that. And kind of so I guess, how do I phrase this? What gave you the courage to start facing stuff kind of in real time? Was it the evidence you had from when you did it during your dark night of the soul?
I feel like when I started doing it, I got so many rewards.
Okay.
So I know that it's always a good thing.
Right.
Even though it's like uncomfortable,
you know what's on the other side of it.
I know what's on the other side. So I know every time I'm going to go into the discomfort, it's going to be worth my time. Because if you look at it this way, like you can, how do you say, you can live your whole life being codependent, right? You can have that pattern for 80 years. Or you can face it once and then be free from it for the rest of your life.
Yet, most of the time, many people do go their whole lives avoiding pain, or unconsciously avoiding something that was so painful that they're like, I'm going to park this here in the body, outside me. I'm going to only see it in other people. But I mean, there are many ways to do it.
Yes.
And I've done all the ways as well. So I'm not saying other people, we. But that's just such an empowering message that you know what's on the other side of it. And when you do it, it actually gives you gifts and freedom, right? And this is a real unlearning, I guess, a remembering and a new way of operating. And, you know, in my work, that's what we're doing. I have a process that goes through the emotional layers. I mean, many processes, but one that's so specifically like, we're going to go to the next layer, the next layer, and the next layer. And I learned this from this woman called Brandon Bays. Mm-hmm. It was something I learned in one of my trainings, peripherally. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. I want to bring that into my hypnotherapy. And the idea was that you go through each emotional layer, and when you get to the bottom, you get to like source. Mm-hmm. And I was like, there's no way that's going to work for everyone. Like even as much proof as I've had, and it's amazing. So I did it myself and I was like, wow, that worked. And every client I've done it with, I was like, how does this happen every time? Because they get to the really hard stuff. Yeah. And it's often that we don't know we're even going to go there because it depends. I made it as part of another process. So it's like, we only go there when, you know, somebody's feeling something in the body and then we just keep going. Yeah. But it's so empowering and amazing. And the speed at which you can go through lifetimes of layers and then go through them, feel them, release them, and then get to the bottom. And then you bring love to everything and you actually release something that you could be carrying with you for years. So it's so, I love the message and the clarity of the way you say it. Mine gets a little circular. No, it's good. But the clarity of that message, if you face it, you will overcome it.
Yes. And I feel like sometimes something can look so horrific and so big because it was like that in the moment.
Yeah.
But what I always do in these sessions is that I bring it to a different dimension. There are different dimensions from which you can look at the trauma. So you can have experienced something and really be a victim of that experience, right? Like this is real. Like I don't want to, bypass any of this. Like you can have being abused or raped or whatever. This real dark things can happen to you. And from that dimension of being the victim of that, the emotions are all over the place. Like you feel so much grief, like sadness, and that's all valuable and valid. And then there is another, but you can get those experiences and pull it to a different dimension. What I mean by that is that you can look at that experience and then ask yourself, okay, from a soul level, why was I there? And what did I learn? And how can I alchemize and transform this into power? So that's all the really traumatizing things that happened in my life, I was able to look at them from a different dimension. And then you can sense that the emotions get less intense because you can see the bigger picture. You can see, okay, what was the purpose of me being there?
Right.
And then it's easier to accept, to forgive, to really, heal that part.
Absolutely. And that key that you're talking about from, that other dimension, right? That other perspective is a shift from the small self to the big self, or the personality to the soul, or whatever. There's all different, I think, metaphors or different schools of thought on it. But it really is that shift of operating system or center of operation.
Yes.
So then you're operating from the soul, like you're in this pulled back shift. So it's actually really freeing in a way, because you see your life as like a multi-lifetime adventure, like a multi-lifetime career path, right?
Yes.
So it's like, oh, I don't, the pressure comes off almost immediately. But to get to that perspective.
Yes. And one question you can ask yourself.
Yes.
One question always works is, what am I learning from this? If you are in a situation where you feel lost or, burned out or even depressed, like you can ask yourself, like, what am I learning from this? And that question, because if you look at the bigger picture, like we're all souls here learning about all kinds of things. And the reality is just asking us to learn. So if we can ask ourselves in every situation, what are we learning, even though it's challenging and it's, really horrifying, then we can. So for example, I had a period that I was really challenged when people were stepping over my boundaries all the time. And it was really annoying and it was really hurting and traumatizing. So and at some point I was like, okay, like what? Like, why is this happening all the time? Like, what am I learning? And then I asked myself, and in a meditation, I asked my body, like, why is this happening? What am I learning? And it was like, oh, you're learning about boundaries. I was like, oh. But then I just set the boundary and learn how to do it. And then I can complete this soul lesson and I can move on.
That's the key, right? Because otherwise we can stay in that
you can
loop
stay in the loop.
Samsara. Yeah.
Because that's the thing, like when you don't face it, the challenge is with how this reality works is that you're going to get a bigger lesson and another bigger lesson. And it's just going to get bigger and bigger and bigger until you listen and you learn. And
yes,
that's the
I've been there. I've got some, like you weren't listening. Now you're listening.
Exactly. Like we all had these situations where you know, like something is like in your awareness, like, and it just gets bigger and it gets bigger. And then at some point, but now I don't let them get so big. I learn them faster so they don't get big and I don't feel like I am surviving.
Yes.
Because I integrate them as soon as I can. Because otherwise life's going to be very painful.
Right. So because it's becoming more of a template, right? Which you're having to build because you weren't taught it, right? I mean, I didn't get to go to a mystery school, did you? I went to like a public school in Texas. They didn't have this. No. But that thank you for that mechanism of the question, because it's like we talk about shifting the operation from like if somebody would have said that to me like 10 years ago, I'd be like, okay, like what, like how? So that question is so powerful, and even neuroscientifically, because when you say, what do I learn? I think the first instinct to someone who might be doing that for the first time is like, well, it's not obvious. well, what does that make you do? It brings you into curiosity. And neuroscientifically, you can't stay in fear and anxiety when you're curious. Different parts of the brain have to get online to be like, okay, what am I looking for? So that is such a technical way of doing that. So thank you for sharing that, because that's what I'm always trying to figure out is like the bite-sized way that we can do this in real time, because it's wonderful conceptually.
Yes.
But sometimes we do need like, okay, there's a thing I can do here.
Yes.
So thank you.
You're welcome. This was at some point, how do you say, some of these things, they just came through because I was sitting so much with my information. I'm saying that.
Well,
that's what I'm trying to say. Is like, if you allow yourself to sit with the feeling, like the emotion is information.
Right.
So sometimes I would get insights after I would sit with my emotions because my field was ready for that, right? So, and this is kind of circling back to what is divine feminine leadership, is there is so much that we can, how do you say, receive from a feminine perspective, from listening and being. And I want to just kind of, how do you say, pop open the minds of like what is possible, because it's unlimited.
That message is amazing. And it really lands when you say it.
Yeah.
Because you say it from an embodied place.
It's unlimited. And I feel that a lot of times when we are in these situations where we feel really lost, we are in this illusion that we think we're really small and we're not so powerful, or but we are just putting so many caps of possibilities on ourselves. But everyone is unlimited and has unlimited potential and unlimited growth potential. But it's just that we sometimes think that we don't have it, and then you cannot create it.
And this information, wisdom, remembering, really is creating this new template that is necessary for divine feminine leadership. So as you're developing these understandings, remembering them, how has this changed your how you operate as a divine feminine leader? And what does it mean to you?
I love this question because it was a journey to kind of understand and learn, like, then, okay, what is the feminine way of leading, or what is the feminine way of working and creating? And one of the most important thing for me was rest. And like, I want to say this to every woman ever, that rest is so crucial for us to be women. And we have been programmed with this idea of being productive, being performing, being, how do you say, wake up early, and then
the morning routine,
and then, you know, like, do an ice bath, do the breath work, do the meditation, do this. Yeah.
No, I was just laughing because of what my acupuncturist was like. She's like, "Do you think your ovaries want an ice bath?" And I'm like,
yeah.
Sorry.
And I really want to highlight the difference of what we need as women and what men needs. It's very different. Like, biologically, we are really wired very differently. And so I worked so hard in my business. You know, I am an entrepreneur. Yeah, I am a woman. So how do you find, you know, the templates to do it? And I also couldn't find them. And I was like, what? Like, how is this not working for me? Because I'm being productive. I wake up every morning. I work, I create, I build. And I was building my company for like 1.5 years. And nothing was really moving. And I was like, why? Like, what is happening? Like, I clearly tried all the different ways, the masculine ways, because I did sales, I did the door-to-door thing, I did go to the Zuidas, be a businesswoman, be an account executive, and I got a burnout, and then now I'm building my own company, and I still feel exhausted.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that's the experience of most women. They're like, why am I so tired?
I mean, I found that 3 times over. I started 3 companies. They were successful. Every time they destroyed me in the process, or
yes.
I destroyed myself in the process in a different way.
Yes.
Like, because I was like, oh, I must be, these are the lessons. And I was looking at the business lessons. Never, you know, I was never operating from, you know, the soul level at
yes.
that stage. And every time I was like, so the question was, if I do this again, I'm just going to destroy myself. How do I do this without destroying myself? And my dark night of the soul was like, I'm not touching anything because I know I can co-create. But in the process, I would get so burnt out that I was like, it would feel like I would create a monster that would destroy me. So I sat on my hands for years being like, I'm not creating anything and putting it out into the world so that it doesn't like eat me up.
Yes. And I totally get that because I felt the same way when I'm building like a conscious company, right? Like, and I am a woman. I consciously was building everything from a place of love and thinking about all the different aspects within the business. And I still felt exhausted. And then at some point I was like, okay, I tried the way that everyone told me it was going to be successful. And now I am exhausted. I am just going to rest.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to do anything else. Like I'm just going to rest. And I'm only going to do the things that I feel called to do. And it was 2 months of resting, 2 months, and it felt so good.
Which actually isn't that long, but from like morning routine culture,
yes,
like it could feel like 2 months.
2
like,
months, yeah. I took 2 months to rest and really shamelessly rest. Like I would sleep.
That's the key, because if you rest and you feel guilty about it, you're just in another cycle.
Exactly. So you want to sit with the shame around resting because it will come, and it also will not only come through you, but it will come through maybe the people around you who say like, why are you not working? Why are you not being productive?
So
are you now? So the layers of the guilt of like not waking up early, allowing yourself to sleep maybe 10 hours, 8 hours, maybe 12, maybe you need 12 hours, maybe you need 16, like depending on how exhausted you are.
I know what you mean.
And the feminine leadership is all about listening to the body. So listen to your body, and your body will tell you exactly what you need. If you need 5 hours, you need 5 hours. But I'm going to tell you, most women need a lot more than that. So what I did is I rested for 2 months, and I said, okay, I'm gonna listen so deeply to my body. And I'm just going to do what I feel called to do. And if I don't feel called to do, then I'm not going to do it. So it's really like, this is the rebellion, I would say, of women. And I understand, like I also used to work for a corporate job. So you need to like look at all the reasons why you feel fear or anxiety, why you feel like you cannot rest. So that's one thing. And the other thing I did is that I started to regulate my nervous system. So we started this podcast with breath. We did 4 seconds in, 6 seconds out. And what it does is that if you breathe out longer than you breathe in, you actually start to downregulate the nervous system. And that will give you calm and rest. So it actually your body feels safe to rest. And when your body feels safe to rest, it will rest. And if you have rested enough, you will feel the calmness to create. You will feel you actually have more brain capacity.
Yes.
So you get access to a lot of the gifts that are actually inside of the body.
Yeah. Because you can actually listen, right?
Exactly. And how do you say, the safer you are, the more you can receive. And the more you can receive, the more you can create. So if you downregulate your nervous, I think just 2 sessions of like 1 hour just breathing out. It's so easy. Like if we get the tools, like I want to make it easy for everyone.
Stuff you can actually just do. Like I need this right now.
Exactly.
I love that. I'm a big advocate of short tools.
Practical things you can do in any moment. So breathing out longer than breathing in, you can do for every stressful thing. If you have a podcast, if you have a talk, if you're doing any business kind of stuff as a woman. Because women, we are so much more sensitive to stress because we are already stressed about not being safe in the world.
Yeah.
So that extra layer of stress of building a business and being seen can really shut us down. So downregulating nervous system and really making that a habit and a practice, it's literally like a whole new world can open up because your body... How do you say, the more rested you are, the more activation you have from your bodily intelligence.
But you can't rest until you feel safe enough to surrender. So
Yeah.
I want to touch on what you just said in terms of the regulating the nervous system. You said safety. And I think that that is a principle of divine feminine leadership is so important, because you rarely see like leadership and safety, but I think it is like a foundation of, you know, what's next? Okay, I'm safe. Now I can rest.
Yes.
Now I've rested. Now I can get in touch.
Yes.
And now I can create.
Yes.
But it really does start with safety, which is funny because our conversation started with like attunement, and that, you know, that you can't really attune to your needs until you feel safe. So that safety piece, I think, is super key in this.
Safety is the thing for women to create within themselves. And I understand it's really hard because there are like a million reasons why you can feel unsafe in the world. But what I start to notice is that if I create more safety within my body, I am creating actually more safety in my reality.
Yeah.
So because you're such a powerful being, if you're in fear, you will create fearful situations. So for me, the regulation of the nervous system is the way to create safety in the body.
Right.
And that means if I am in a stressful situation, you know, the other day there was a woman at our co-living that really fell really hard on her nose. And it was really bleeding a lot. And it was really like a traumatic experience for her. But in those situations, if I can stay calm,
yes,
and I can help her regulate and feel safe,
yes,
and I do that by down-regulating my nervous system and letting her know, like, I am here, you are safe.
Yeah,
you know, I see you. Let's breathe together. And so, in those situations, even though they're scary and unsafe, I am safe, and because I am calm, I can create safety for others.
that is so powerful. There's an entire book called The Worst is Over, and it was written by a hypnotherapist who's also a nurse, who would talk about in emergency situations, like if you pulled up on an accident, if you can just do that, you kind of use the steps of hypnotherapy to just be like, I'm safe. I take the authority of safety now, transmit it to you. And it's just, there was a study done. They took like a paramedics unit in like Kansas or something, probably getting that wrong, but somewhere. And they had half of the paramedics trained in doing exactly that. I am safe, saying the right words. And then they even had a little hypnosis, like you can stop the bleeding. They were seeing that the results of people who would survive or get better really fast were so increased that they had to stop the study because it was so powerful what you can do to regulate someone's nervous system and then physically get their body to heal. So imagine applying that in a non-physical emergency.
Yes. And so like I feel like that's really a superpower to how do you say? I know like women often we feel like we need to, and I think it's still valid to feel like you want to be safe when there are men around that are protecting you. And I think it's a really valid need that we have as women, because physically we still are less, strong. And so it's very valid to have that need.
There's a biological, physical reality to it.
Exactly. Like I want to acknowledge that that's really valid if we feel we have this desire in ourselves. And I also want women to know that it's okay to listen to that. But there is also a level of safety that you can create within yourself. And by doing that, I felt before, like, almost felt sometimes like my reality was attacking me because I was so scared. And I would get scared and then I would attract traumatic experiences. But now when, something really intense happens, I don't feel anymore like it's attacking me. I feel like, all right, what do we do? Left, right, let's go take care of this, and then we'll move on.
That's incredible because the fear can just spiral you. And I've been there. I mean, many times. Probably
me too.
Still go there. Yeah. So to be able to be like, this doesn't have control over me, because fear is the thing that stops us. Fear is the thing that keeps us from feeling things and keeps us from growing. So if you can really look at that in a different way from feeling safe, it kind of changes everything, doesn't it?
It does. And how do you say, like, it's when you regulate the nervous system, you are embodying it. So you have your whole body that's helping you to create that reality. And it's not just that you're forcing yourself to feel safe. You don't feel safe.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you actually need the physiological aspect sometimes first. I found out that the hard way, like if I drink too much coffee, okay, I will suddenly, my thoughts will change.
Yeah.
So like, because, you know, it'll make my heart rate go up. I'm very sensitive to coffee.
Stress.
Yeah. So my heart rate, if my heart rate's up, I think my mind says, well, the physiology is changed. When heart rate's up, we think thoughts of impending doom. So I would find that if I drank too much coffee, this was a while ago, and now I know not to do that, but I would have feelings like while I was driving, like, oh, something could happen. I'm like, why am I thinking this way? The physiology kicked off what was going through my mind and emotions. So that taught me like, oh, maybe I can do something physiological with my body to override my mind.
Yes.
Which is, I think, part of the divine feminine template.
Yes, exactly. So how do you say, like, I think we have no idea yet what we are capable of as humans, because we are limiting our biology by fear, and we are limiting our capacities, our talents, and our gifts unknowingly.
Yeah.
Because we are scared.
Yeah.
So how do you say, like, it's the same, how do you say, the capacity, do you know the gene keys?
Yes.
Yes. So Richard Rudd talks about this evolution of humanity going from kind of a larvae, like a dragonfly. First it lives like underwater as a larvae, and then it goes out in the water and becomes a dragonfly. And he describes that humanity is in a similar evolution like that. We have been larvae before, and I was always so intrigued by that. I was like, but what? Like, the potential is from us to go from a larvae to a dragonfly. Like, what would that look for humans, right? And I have a feeling that the differentiation, if you're a larvae or a butterfly, is how much you can regulate your nervous system and how much then you can access your DNA and all the dormant DNA within your body, and the talents and the gifts that you already have and you already own. Like that's like the divine feminine leadership is about the fully embodiment through the body of activating our higher self and creating that into the reality.
I love that metaphor and that way of explaining the evolution. I love Richard Rudd and something he said once that I found really powerful toward, what we're talking about, which is, how did he say it? If you were trying to hide your greatest gifts, your most divine gifts, where would you hide them? In the darkest places. So it just really speaks to like going there, because there is, as you said, a reward.
Yes.
And there's a lot of, he talks about the time scales, the Kala chakra. One of the lineages that talk about the Wheel of Time talk about how the Kali Yuga ended on the 25th of March.
Yes.
And we're moving into this new age, the Aquarian age. And there are so many different ways of looking at this, but one kind of overarching theme is that we're moving out of a lot of these lower frequencies slowly. We've talked about in the past that we both love David Hawkins' map of the scale of consciousness.
Yes.
So the shame, guilt, and fear, those are the things that keep us. They pull us down. So if we can move out of those up to 200 to the level of courage to say, okay, I'm going to look at this and alchemize it and move up. And there are so many indigenous prophecies that we would start releasing these lower vibrational states of shame, guilt, and fear, that new humans that come here aren't going to be feeling that, because I assume it's because that we're, many of us are doing the work to descend really to those places and face those lower frequencies and move up. And that really is, I think what Rudd speaks to, and many others, that is the way that we start to do this, but we have to do it on an individual level. Like, I think I've learned lately that we have so much more personal responsibility and power than we think. So much of what's happening out there, not just externally in our world, but collectively is related to what's happening internally. And to know that we have that much power, I think can be scary. Yeah. And, one of the big things I see with women is actually, a lot of our fear is fear of our own power.
It is. It's so beautiful that you describe, like, basically hiring the baseline, right? Like, because we all have a frequency. Like everything is made of frequency. Like we have sound, we have colors, etc., and we also have our own frequency. So the work that I do with the emotion alchemy is like you explained, like going to the darkest place, the lowest frequency that's inside of the body. You feel it, and the emotion, the energy just wants to be seen. And the energy just wants to kind of move.
Be seen.
And be seen. And so often the only thing you have to do is acknowledge those feelings because they were all valid at a certain moment in your life. So the acknowledgement of the feeling, of the energy, is actually releasing that frequency, and then you can alchemize it and transform it into love or whatever.
Gifts.
Yeah, whatever. But by doing that consecutively, if you do every day or you really take the time to go there, you're gonna up-level your whole baseline because you're letting go of all the lower frequency emotions. And I really love also you touch on the power that we have. And I understand that it's scary, but it's probably scary because the feminine power has been consciously buried.
Yes.
So we have a lot of these blockages in our being from thousands of years of suppression. So I feel like even the fear of our own power is very, very valuable.
Valid
and
as
valid.
well. Yes.
and, you know, it's...
Yeah, when we showed our power, what happened?
Exactly. So...
Or a different type of power, you know, the feminine power, you know, you were burnt at the stake
Yes.
or called a heretic.
Yes. So it's not weird that we have all those fears, but if we can go then again to those fears and to those blockages and then tell ourselves, like, we are living, like you said, in a different age, like it's the age of Aquarius. Like I also didn't feel safe to share about all these things for a lot of years, like, and it's also valid. But now, since we moved through this portal, I do feel safe to share about it. And also because I removed all of the blockages.
Right. So it's kind of like it's quite spiral dynamic, right?
Yeah.
Because you kind of remove them and then you take another step forward. And, you know, I think also it's a real pointing out because you had the experience like back when you were doing like door-to-door sales, and I had the experience when I was working, you know, at a hedge fund. I was noticing, I'd also read The Secret, and I was like, hey, I've done that. And, you know, there's a whole other story, but I'm sure I've told you before, but, you know, I was starting to recognize this. And it was a pattern that I started to recognize that, God, you know, the stuff that I've created, the big stuff, right, has never come from the things that I think it did, right? So it took looking back, like, for example, I mean, I have so many examples, but I want to bring up one because it leads back to the kind of just suppression of the feminine and historically, like actually.
Yes.
So when I first came to Portugal, I was still doing my consulting. So I went from being an entrepreneur and helping other people create their businesses to being like, I can't create another monster. Let me just help other people create theirs. So I was doing that, and it was just really feeling, you know, old to me.
Yep. And
I wanted to go all in on hypnotherapy. I was leaving a 12-year relationship. The pandemic had just happened. Like it was, it was just not realistic. And it didn't make sense. So I had taken some time, came to Portugal, didn't even know I was going to stay here. And, you know, I was sitting there trying to build the funnels and do all the things. And it was just really exhausting me. And I took a step back and I was like, you know, I'm just going to do what I love to do. And I, you know, took a trip with a friend, and we actually went to Tomar, which is like the Knights Templar, was one of the like kind of headquarters of the Knights Templar. And I found myself, I'm just interested in that type of history. So I was like just taking a trip there. And while I was there, I got 3 people that reached out to me out of nowhere, people I've never met. Oh, so-and-so said you do this. They signed up for my full program, because I create like a coaching container with hypnotherapy before I'd left there. So I had overcome my consulting income and I wanted to quit. And I just got the message, stay in Portugal, live here, you're going to be taken care of. And it was so counterintuitive or counterproductive what I was doing. Yeah. And it was just a clear message in my body that like my nervous system was like, you're staying here. And it was relaxed. And I remember the exact day and I was like, yeah, but now I have to find an apartment and everything, and I had all these requirements. I don't have any stuff. Like, am I going to find something furnished? I went online and found the perfect apartment. It had everything I need. The landlord was like, a girl my age from Canada was like, oh, I had the same birthday as me. Was like, take it. It was her former apartment. She was an interior designer. It was like the next day I had an apartment, all the clients, and I was like, I feel safe to take the leap. So I rested and I said, I'm just going to follow my curiosity. I did something that was my interest and I felt very guided to. I wasn't paying attention to my business and, not to go back to results, but I was like, my results were so much better. And it continued for the next, 2 years of like, every time I would build something or a funnel or do things like the systematic way, it wouldn't yield anything. But if I went dancing, I'd meet someone at the ecstatic dance. And it was like every piece of evidence has shown me now what works and what my template is, but my mind will still try to override it.
Yeah. I think this is a perfect description of how it works. Like for me, like I started resting and then everything happened in my business. All the opportunities came. Then that's the divine feminine. And then we're like circling back to listening, because you did listen, right? You listened to your body, like what's, something bigger than you trusted and you surrendered to the bigger picture. And that was bringing you to the frequency so you could receive all the opportunities and the blessings like your apartment.
Yes.
Which is incredible. I think this is so telling on how this works. And, for me, it was the same. Every time I went to this beautiful place in one of the places where Mother Mary has been sighted in Portugal, and I had the best day ever. And then all of these beautiful opportunities came. I went to a birthday festival, and then we got opportunities to do the cacao at Goat Festival. It was just because I was
following what you enjoy, which is so not, I was told, the opposite of that, in my upbringing at school, in society, but I have so many examples, and I'm even telling myself, because sometimes I forget this, by the way. So like, remember, you have all these examples, because there's always like that thing of like, well, it's not going to work this time. Like, but I bring up the example of Tamar and, following that Knights Templar interest of mine. And that was a couple of years ago now, but, they, as we've gone to an event that, we've kind of started talking about this, but they were there to protect the lineage or the Mary Magdalene wisdom. So you brought up Mother Mary. So I just want to bring it around to that, because there is this emergence or reemergence of the wisdom. And, that Magdalene thread is so much a part of this. And, there is mythology and cosmology and history that is aligned with and starting to take shape to the, there's instincts and intuition, but there is information that we can start to open up to. So
yes,
I want to open up that.
Oh, I'm so grateful for this question. I feel my whole being is the first time I drove into Portugal, I could feel Mary Magdalene's presence. Very strong. I was like, wow, okay, interesting. And more strongly, I could feel her grief and her pain for all the years, thousands of years that her wisdom has been buried. And this was more like a spiritual experience for me. But I started to then get curious and dig deeper and okay, then who was she? And why did all this kind of happen and unfold? So the last, I would say, months has been a lot about reconnecting to her wisdom for me. And it has also been a lot of the keys that I now have about divine feminine wisdom is because I started to look into who she was and what she was embodying. So a lot of the resources that I looked into were different scriptures that have been found in Egypt. So a lot of the divine feminine voice have been deliberately removed from the Bible.
Non-canonical text.
Yes. So anything that has been about the Gnostic tradition, and a Gnostic tradition is about learning from doing and embodying and knowing. So it's like really the inner knowing. And so a lot of her scriptures have been removed, and they have not been found for thousands of years. And then they have been discovered in Egypt. They are in Coptic language, and they have been translated, and you can find them. So if you want to, look into this, please do if you feel called to, because it's really has opened so much for me. And they are called the scriptures of the Nag Hammadi library.
The Nag Hammadi texts.
Yes. So these are the texts. You can find them online, Google it, and there are different scriptures in there. There's the Gospel of Mary, the Thunder of the Perfect Mind, and the Gospel of, I think, Philip and Thomas. Well, there are a couple ones.
Gospel of Thomas is in there.
There are a couple ones, and they're all have been removed from the Bible. And all of these texts, they are about the inner part of the embodiment of creating Christ consciousness.
The missing link.
The missing link. So it's super powerful to, if you feel called to do it, then please read them. And so one of the most powerful texts for me was the Thunder of the Perfect Mind, because this is a beautiful poem that talks about the paradoxical nature of the feminine energy. And it talks about, it's very like raw and real, and it talks about how the feminine is both, like there's one sentence that's very triggering for a lot of people, but it says like, I am the whore and the holy woman. And it's like this paradoxical poem that's written like, I don't know how long ago, but it talks about how the feminine energy works, and how it's both the dark and the light, and that it's, it's what we talked about. It's like teaching us these lessons, if we don't, it's like this mother that if you don't learn it, you get like hit harder.
That was the gentle way. And
you get like a gentle, and then if you don't, like it's like your mom, basically. She's your mother. And she's telling you like, this is the way, like be nice, do this, X, Y, Z. And if you don't listen, she will tell you louder, and then she will tell you louder again. And then at some point she will scream at you. So, and I feel like that's for me so telling in how I have learned all the things in my life, and how you can understand how this energy works. Like I describe it as it's like a womb of like creation, like trying to mold you and fold you and like, shape you into who she knows how you can be and who you actually are. But she's just trying to remove all the illusions from your life. So it's been so powerful to look into this and to read the text and to feel the resonance of that truth, because I feel like a lot of the times we're trying to create in this world, but we really don't understand how this universe works.
That's right. That's the information that's lacking. So we're creating from a very limited part of it.
Exactly. So if you can learn how the universe works, and you can learn the basic rules or laws, how it works, you can create with a lot more ease and a lot more fun. And so for me, what I learned in the past years is that, yes, there is one, like one thing that connects us all. You can also call it the monads. That's like one single place where everything is created from. You can call it God, and it has different names, but it's like one beautiful, highly intelligent being that's so much more intelligent than we all are together. And through, this source point, it's kind of reflected that there are all these different creations and expressions in how it tries to understand itself. So we are all connected to source, and we are all a little creation from source in a different perspective on the reality.
Yeah, that's so powerful, especially as you said, like there's the monad, like this, the way that you can connect with it. And if you think about the scripture that you mentioned.
The thunder perfect mind.
Of the perfect mind.
Yeah.
And the way that we've developed over the last 2,000 years because of this suppression is we've overdeveloped half of our mind,
Yeah.
the left brain.
Yes.
And the left brain is really, I love Ian McGilchrist's work because he really breaks this down like neuroscientifically, but also he relates it to the big picture that we're talking about and ancient wisdom and how all of the ancient traditions were trying to explain this to us, because that left brain view is a map of the world. Yeah. And then there's the records, the infinite information. But from in this left brain, we can only see part of it. And the right brain is what connects us with the rest of the information. So the part of us that's, we always praise because it's logic and rationality. Logic can only be good. You can only get a good conclusion using a logical process if you have good data. But we have such a limit of the information. Yes. So this misunderstanding or lack of understanding of how the universe works and all the rest of the data out there is missing. So we have to override logic now with this new type of intelligence, and that's connection. I call it right brain intelligence, heart intelligence, the feminine, right? It's it's the part of us that allows us to receive that signal. And then we can bring that into the logic and categorize it. But then we have to come back to the right brain. And I feel like that's the kind of instinctual opening. But this scripture and many others, like the Gospel of Mary Magdalene and the knowledge that has been suppressed but is coming forward, is allowing us to recreate that map.
Yes, exactly. And if you look at it from how the universe works, then you have the monad, and the story is that it's split in two. Masculine, feminine, two forces of nature. And you also call this the divine father or the divine mother. And if you think about it, like if you're just using half of that, you just focus on the masculine, like what are we doing? Like it just doesn't make any sense. Like we're missing half of the story. Like you're saying, like it's like we've been missing half of the story for 2,000 years. And if you look at it that way, then also know we're missing half of our capacity to create.
Yes, and the part that is connected by actual neurobiological reality can connect to that part, because the other part creates the map. If you haven't read, I would check out Ian McGilchrist's book, The Master and the Emissary. This left brain is supposed to be a servant to the right brain. So if you think about that, it's supposed to serve the queen.
Oh, wow.
Right? The masculine is supposed to serve, both are important.
Yes.
Right? So you have to transcend and include. You don't just, it's like an airplane. Like you can't fly without one wing. It would just crash.
Exactly. Yeah. You need
kind
both.
of a metaphor for
life.
Yeah.
So you need both and you want them also to work together, because then you have the full picture. And how do you say, there's so many analogies from understanding how this reality works, because it makes a lot of sense. How do you say, for example, if we're all connected to that source and we're all different perspective, that also means that not just only my perspective of your perspective is the truth. Like it cannot be. It's impossible. The truth is so big because it's all our perspectives together. Like it's so big, you cannot even grasp it. And it's also it's okay that we don't know everything and that we don't understand everything. But there are these universal laws and truths that we can feel, that we can resonate and try to understand and grasp, and then put all the puzzle pieces together and to try to see if we can kind of understand this reality. But you're still just one
your one perspective.
Yeah.
And I find that the more perspectives you can take, the higher your level of understanding can be. And, the more patterns you can recognize, and the more you see paradox, right? And all great truths are both true and untrue at the same time. I mean, small truths like, yes, I had eggs for breakfast. That's true.
Yeah.
but great truths and understanding paradox. And just, it brings you back to that kind of polarity and duality. You kind of have to have the light and the dark, you definitely have to have the light and the dark, the true and the false. They all have to be there in whole.
Yes.
And when you can take that new center of operation back, you're seeing the whole thing as all necessary, all in balance, and all beautiful. And we've been looking at it from inside, thinking, we're in the terrain, but we're in a map. Yeah. And I guess that's a connection with the terrain, like the greater field.
Exactly. And I how do you say, I feel that it's so interesting. Like now we had this shift, right? It's just a month if you think about it. So I'm laughing about this because that means that there's just the unlimited potential is unlocking within all of us. And it's just a very exciting time to be alive. And that we can now put all these, because I am also like now putting all these puzzle pieces together of like 30 years, right? Like, and I know a lot of other people are also putting them together, and we're putting them together.
Yeah, I love that. We're putting them together.
And then you're like, oh, wait, you also have this. And then you can, like you said, there are these universal truth or things that really resonate, that feel like truth in your soul, and you can feel it by when your cells start to vibrate. Maybe you have it when you listen to some of these subjects, right? And that's really,
it feels like remembering. It doesn't feel like I'm learning new knowledge. It feels like, oh yeah, I already knew that. Like, yeah, it's coming back online.
Exactly. It's like, obviously. Like sometimes I feel like that when I learn something, I'm like, this makes more sense than everything I've ever learned in school, for example.
Yes, for sure. Or like, it's almost like once I got it, it's almost like the rest of the words are too much. Like it's already like, I already like know it now.
Yeah.
It's hard to explain, but it's like a reminder, and then it's like, oh yeah, I already know the rest.
Exactly.
It's like seeing a way and being like, I already remember how to get there. I just needed you to point in the direction.
Exactly. And you have the direction, you can remember, and then you can... So talking about the paradoxical nature that you talked about, because I learned this when I was reading The Kabbalion. Have you read the book?
Yes, I feel that that was one of there were so many things in that book that turned lights back on.
Same.
So yes.
Yes. So if anyone listening and hasn't read it and is curious, like I would highly recommend, because this is one of the books that I feel contains these universal laws and some of the universal truths. And I feel like it's a book that speaks to the soul. It can resonate with you in ways, I can reread it again, and I get different insights and information depending on where I'm at in my life. But this was really like a turnkey book for me to read, to understand. Because, you can try to understand all the facts and the little things, but it's different when you understand universal truths, because it translates to everything you do in your life.
Yeah, I think it's that book is such a wonderful, perfect simplification of, all of these laws. And I think if we can understand how our mind works, right? So that information that's coming online, and how our nervous system works, and then how the universe works, it's kind of the whole key. And it wasn't just the information in that book, but it was some of I feel like it's a psychoactive text, in that when you read it, one of the things it says is like, the lips of wisdom are only open to the ears of understanding. You will understand it at the level of consciousness at which you read it. And I feel that's true with anything. Yeah. Religious tradition, ancient wisdom, everything. I can see things now from a different perspective, and it's a completely different body of knowledge, has completely different meaning. So I really believe that the level of consciousness and as many perspectives as we can look at something through, it changes the information. It's like a psychoactive, like living information based on, when we expand or increase the quality of our consciousness.
Yeah. And it's so beautiful that you said also you will receive what you are ready for.
Yeah.
And I think that I really needed to learn that.
Yeah.
And also in what I share to specific people, because sometimes I want to share something, I'm like super excited to share, and then someone else was not ready to receive it. So also I think it's beautiful that, for me, very telling that people are now ready to receive some of these things. And maybe not everyone, right? But I feel that when we went through this portal last month, I feel a lot more people are now ready to receive these universal truths. And maybe some people are not yet. And I think that's completely fine. And accepting that as well. Who do we share to? When do we share?
The discernment.
Yeah.
Super important.
Yeah.
And, I can speak for myself. There were things that I wasn't ready to understand, and then they come back around, and then I understand them, and it's completely different, but I wouldn't have looked at it, or I would have, I mean, and really simple things, like somebody would have recommended a book and I wouldn't read it.
Yeah.
And then, 5 years later, I'm like, oh, this is amazing.
Yeah, this book. Yeah.
And, my ex would be like, well, I told you. I'm like, I wasn't ready to hear it. So but there's so much truth in that. Like, if you're not ready, the information doesn't land.
Yes, exactly. And I feel like sometimes that was a bit frustrating for me because I started to research these things like 7 years ago. I was like, wow, like I remember diving into Robert Edward Grant and, Matthias Stefanos. And, I was like, oh my God, like this is amazing, because I was ready to receive it. But then I was in my own, how do you say, void, because I didn't know anyone around me that was also ready to receive it or was ready to talk about it. So I was like, wow, like what do I do with all this information? And I think it was good because I really needed to then fully integrate and then embody and really, how do you say, also let the body become ready to then also share or talk about these things with the right people. But it is a journey, I would say. And if you are ready, if you're still listening to this, then it means you're ready.
I would say, exactly. Like you would have turned us off at several points.
Yeah. You'd be like, never mind. Yeah.
And that's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, I had the same experience where it's like, I'm so excited. It's such good news.
Yeah.
Like there's so much potential. And, you know, if it's not, for me, it was probably the way I was articulating things, but also it would just be, there were times where like really great news, because I was stuck in my, like, I don't want to hear that because it doesn't feel available to me, or the information doesn't resonate for various reasons. Because, when you move back into the center of operation, this is a multi-lifetime journey, right? This is a multi-lifetime career path.
Yes.
So we are all in different stages of the journey. And I think that that's always really important to remember. So everyone's learning the lessons that they need to, attracting the situations that will help them learn their lessons or not. And, there's so much responsibility in actually, it's fun and exciting, but there is responsibility in it.
It is, because once you know how you're holding yourself back, you have to take responsibility to change it.
Yeah.
So it's totally natural that maybe that takes lifetimes to get to a place. Okay, I am the one who's creating all of this. So, but it's both empowering and it's also the responsibility that is there. And I think it's, how do you say, healthy to maybe protect yourself from it, because maybe you're not ready to take the responsibility yet.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that sovereignty is like holding freedom and the responsibility that comes with it at the same time, because freedom is amazing, but there is a lot of responsibility to it. So some people would rather be, safe than free. And there were times in my life where I chose safety over freedom and like averted responsibility. So I think that's true sovereignty, is stepping into both with eyes open at the same time.
Yes.
But I want to leave anyone listening with an empowering message around what's emerging, the transmission of divine feminine leadership. So what would you leave our listeners with today?
One thing that was the most empowering thing for me, and it's also divine feminine leadership skill, is to remember that you, in every moment, you have the power of free will to choose how you react and how you respond. And creating a little bit of distance sometimes in when you feel triggered or when something is, challenging, and allowing yourself to breathe, maybe even regulate, will give you the power to react with love. And if you can respond with love as much as you can within your life is going to be incredible.
It's really inspiring and empowering. And thank you for everything that you shared today. I love the specific questions that you've given the listeners to ask themselves, to actually, create the shifts, the practices, and all of the wisdom and magic that you share. So
You're very welcome.
Thank you so much for being here, Philine. And I just want to just say where to find you and Mmm Cacao.
Yes. Well, thank you so much for having me, first of all.
It's been a pleasure.
I'm very grateful. Where to find me? Well, if you feel called to somehow work with me, you're very welcome to send me a message on Instagram. My Instagram name is Philine Kok. You can find Mmm Cacao. You can also find me through Mmm Cacao if you really don't know how to spell my name.
I'll leave all the information as well.
And if you feel called to taste our cacao, you can buy it at mmmcacao.earth and really enjoy the most delicious cacao ever.
And I highly recommend you do.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I loved this conversation. I feel like we could weave deeper, and we will. And I'm sure we'll be co-creating a lot of wonderful things in this divine feminine template together.
Yay.
Thank you.